Oh, hey there. Salute Paints again, and we have company. Oh, so can't leave alone. Oh well. Well, let's get back to what we were doing. So, the routine. Paints down here and brushes. Reference. The color chroma up here, and there's our main camera where we get ready to paint. And we're using a different lighting again. And we're using a two-part lighting. So, if we look over here, we can see there's a light to both the left and the right. And again, why do we change lighting every once in a while is to make sure that we get all the flaws out from the miniature, because there's just certain things that you don't see when the light is placed in a particular way, especially when it comes to painting real shadows rather than relying on shadows of the surrounding environment. So, well, it looks like my cat wants to leave me off a sudden. Yeah, okay, so where were we the last time? So we are actually at a point where we can finally get to detailing this model, and we have done pretty much the overall. It's just that we need to do the details, and then we need to do the filtering of getting the unity between all of the clothing and pretty much every part of the miniature. So the first thing we'll do is we will go ahead and get the colors right on the hands and whatnot. So let me just arrange my camera over here so we all can see better. There we go. Just going to clean this. I have cat fur everywhere, so if you're like me and you have a cat around, once in a while you need to take like a makeup brush like this, and then you just kind of brush over your miniature, because that way we can get rid of all those pesky fur. If you have a dog fur, and if you have a cat, so I have cat fur around, and that's not always fun. So let's just go ahead and really get some paints on this. And at this point, I'm just pretty much making sure that every part of the model comes together, because although we've done the color environment for most of the parts of the miniature, there's going to be main parts like this that we have kind of ignored, and we want to give it the attention that it needs. It really deserves. So we're just going to go at it lightly, and we are going to use a kind of a wash, or I'm just going to glaze with ridiculously thinned down paint on specific parts with my feather brush, which is the brush that I really love using. So I'll just go ahead and grab some, cat fur again. Grab some black, a little bit of black on this, and just a little bit of the inks that I've kind of mixed down here to get this dark value. Kind of place them in here for the hand. Okay, just to make sure it's down there. And then I want to make sure that I've thinned down that black a little bit more to get the crevices inside that whatever that is, that staff, the eagle head on the staff, and kind of fill out all the pieces. Now this is the point where I would use black, because it's exposed heavily to the light, and later on I'll dim it, but for right now we're just gonna draw on the shadows as heavily as we can. Right here we're just getting it hardened in there. And by the way, so kind of the point in washing is you often hear from miniature painters that they're trying to get the crevices and just kind of shade it. I mean, everything is a shade technically, so it's I mean, every sort of blend is some kind of a shade. The point of blending is to shade something, so you're either shading into another color or you're darkening something. So because typically shadows are a little bit more saturated. Now that's not always the case, and I mean, when we go ahead and just kind of, well, I mean, what we call washing like this, what we're really doing is we intend to fill out all the occlusion bits. So an occlusion is when you have in real life we have this odd illusion that human beings have to kind of perceive an object. So if we kind of tighten our hand, we see that there's a line that's creating that was created by pinching my fist in this way. So even if I shine light heavily on it, like right now I'm just bringing the light close to it, you can still see that that line. And so that line is it's what we call an occlusion effect. And so it's something where if you're interested in, you can look it up further. And it's knowing how to play with the lines. And this occlusion effect doesn't necessarily appear everywhere, but it appears definitely in the tightest spots of any two surfaces meeting. So when we apply this this line, this kind of imaginary line together into like a black, we actually create a distinction between two parts of an object. Oh, it's turns out to be raining right now. Oh well, there's nothing you can do. I've pretty much closed up all my windows and room and everything. So I'm just going ahead and fill in all that crevices right now. And notice how I'm only doing this after I get all the blends on the model. Like I didn't do this early on and then like put my paints thin and then kind of go over it in detail. And that's because at those points of the at the past points where I was kind of painting this miniature, I'm just focusing on the undercoat or the overall and the environment. Because as far as my discipline goes in terms of art, we always focus on the overall, and I never really paint on one piece first again. So that's why I was taught in art school. That's what we generally taught in order to survive in the art line. We are told that at every stage we need to make sure we have a clear idea of what's going on. Now, of course, there are artists that don't follow this rule, because every art rule pretty much has like you don't need to follow any rules really until you've kind of already got your own way of doing things. But this has always just been kind of like the way I did it. My teachers taught me to do it. The other artists I meet told me that it's best to do this, and so I just keep doing it. Now there are masterful painters or drawing artists that's like Kim Jong-gi, who is like, he doesn't even draw the overall. He just looks like he has photographic memory, and when he paints, he just does on one piece of the model. And I believe that there are quite a few artists out there who does the same as well. And they don't really need to kind of work on all the colors at once. They just kind of start with one piece. And I'm usually noticed as the artists that have worked on the same piece for a really long while or repeated times, that they feel pretty confident with putting on those layers and finishing one part of the miniature before the rest. Because there's all sorts of issues when you do it in that way. Like your eyes just start fixating on any particular kinds of lighting. And my cat is kind of looking at my feet right now in an odd way. I kind of need to focus on what I'm doing. But okay, we're gonna continue here. I'm gonna take my brush and then make sure I get all of the points where it should be skin tones to be a little bit more like skin tone. So we just kind of lighten it. We don't really need it to tell us that it's a skin tone. We just need to get an impression of it. So let's just go ahead and dab on this paint. Oops, still too thin. Oh, I'll need something more opaque than this for now. So I'll make sure to get a white. Remove this cat fur and just go on it like so. And the reason why we're putting on this white in this such a way is because we want to have some opaque paint on before we put our skin tones. Because as you noticed earlier, the skin tones wasn't sticking onto it. So when we put on white, and a lot of painters will encounter this thing where white is really chalky, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. Because when you put on white paint, and white paint being chalky as it is, it's a matte surface to it. The finishing is matte. So what happens is that when you put other paints on it, unless it has a gloss medium in it, you can actually just kind of paint over it. So this is what we're doing now. We're just kind of graying out this this part of the model so it's not too dark, and we're making sure it's just not pitch black and it doesn't have that satin finish over it. So we're just kind of doing two things at once. The other part that I want to focus on is down here, which is this part of the miniature is not supposed to be that dark, so we're just gonna go with it. And really at this point of the miniature, we can kind of safely put our brightest whites and pretty much anything that we need. So over here, I'll just go ahead and place it on here, put more of this white, just kind of glob onto it like this. And it's okay to be a little bit careless for me over here, and that's because, oops, let's just go ahead and put a little bit more here, down here. It's supposed to cast a gleam. We need to make sure to put a white on here as well, in between the hands on the top surface here. Okay, there we go. You can see that clearly. Making sure that I don't go off camera or anything like that. Okay, and then we also want to make sure that we put some white at the edge of this rim sleeve really carefully. We just want to lighten it up in bits. We don't need to really go at it really heavily or anything. Okay, then we keep going up, keep going up. So you can see how we're finally going on to highlights, and even with my highlights I don't necessarily go at it on it too thick. I just go at it in bits and steps, and we're keeping it salt saturated for now, except for the top here, which needs to be white, and the edge here, just the very top, and we'll leave it like that. Okay, and then we'll clean off on the other side. There we go. I have a lamp just to my right, and I'm trying not to bump into it. This is pretty challenging too. Alright, so the next part is that we'll go ahead and put on the whites on the hair. So we just kind of do that here. Remember, she's going to be blonde, and we will add more annotations of it so that we can infer to it as a to her as a blonde with the right notes. But for now, we are just making sure that we get our highlights and our values right, because that's actually the most important part. Any painting that you have, you need to focus on it with the highlights and the values of the darks. Otherwise, it's just not going to. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Okay, there you go. Okay, now for the face. And at this point of face, we can actually put our whites, because she has her face now in the right value for the most part, except for the side that's facing the light. Right now, as it is, there's a kind of imaginary shadow that's being caused by the staff. So we could just go ahead and add just a bit of white at the top of her cheek, like so. And we just want to make sure we didn't accidentally put paint where we didn't want it, so we're just gonna zoom in and check like this. Okay, we can see that she has that one iris over to the right that's kind of filled in with white. Whoops, I keep hitting that button. Let me just adjust this real quick. Okay, and then so do we have all the highlights? So no, we have not. We need to add in whites over here as well. Whites over here. Finally. Again, those parts really softly. And then later on we'll tint the paint so that we can get a better grasp of that value. Okay, let's just go ahead and do the back. So this part is going to be a little bit more dark. This part is going to be a little bit more white. Too much. That's fine now. Oops. Can you see that? Yep, there we go. And then we want to put just a little bit of white over here at the edge. Okay, fade it off. Put some white here. At the top. Then we go ahead and put some black. Hey Pache, Coco is busy, not now. Where's my cat? Just kind of nibbling at my feet, looking for some attention. Oh. Okay. So we're gonna place this parts in black. Make sure that it's the right tone. And then let me see what else. Probably a little bit towards the bottom here. Okay. Towards here is black. We need to remind ourselves. And these crevices, we want to make sure we get all the pure blacks in. So, which is why we're doing this. We probably will need a little bit more ink later on. We're making sure we double check every piece, which is why I have the light shining in this bottom way from the bottom, so that we can get the proper lighting for it to double check what we need to. Underneath here as well, don't forget that area underneath here. Okay, and we have a value that's similar to when we first start off, which is what we want over here as well, on the back of the hair. I realize sometimes the shadow being cast onto the right lamp, so I'm just going to lower that a little bit. And then let's just kind of double check what we have on over here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to darken the metal parts a lot more, so that after, when we go ahead and do the metal parts, because we're finally getting to a point where we can mine out all the details, which is actually one of my more favorite parts of a miniature. Like everything else that came before is just like the steps, you know, but like the parts where you finally get to identify the details of the miniature is the really fun part, where everything comes together. So I'm gonna make sure that we are able to do that. Putting this black over here, and it's okay to get a little bit on the side of the edge, because that's easily fixed. You can just kind of wipe it like this with some slow dry medium. It's okay. Let it blend. Slow dry medium on the top. Let it blend. And kind of put over here. Into from this side. And two from this side. And over here inside, just getting this black over here. Alright, so where else do we need to? Just over here, so a little bit. Okay, now let's go ahead and make a detail on certain pieces. Can't wait. Let's just go ahead and mix our white. This is a part where we finally need to do quite a bit of mixing on our miniature. We didn't do much mixing at the beginning at all, because we didn't really need to, since we're blending for the most part. But over here is when we finally get to be detailed. So for example, just add more white here. Okay, we can just go ahead and finally add our strongest highlights. And we want to make sure that the highlights make sense. There we go. We're gonna actually draw out the eye a little bit later, but not now, not yet. And I'm going to put on this black here. So I'm actually really happy to get to this part. This is actually one of my favorite parts in painting any miniature. And we will make sure we want to brighten this part a little bit. So see how we're just kind of like filling the blanks over that black that we've added on earlier. And later on we will have to add just a little bit of brown and magenta on certain parts, just to be able to tell a difference. Okay, so here, just to get this piece over here, and over here we need to make sure we get just the surfaces to the top, because we'll be darkening the ones underneath. Okay, right. Let's just go ahead and while we're waiting for that to dry, we'll just go ahead and get the shoulder. Make sure to thin that out. There we go. Add back that saturation into the brightness, just for a tad bit. Over here as well. Just really slowly. Over here. There'll be a shadow that's casted on this side, so we need to make sure that we mark that. Make sure that brightness isn't too illuminating, because right now I think it's going overboard. You should just make sure those values are right. But for the color yellow, we don't really need it to be so saturated. Okay, we need one blotch of white here, or rather yellow. Another one from this side over here, and I'm gonna make sure to draw it on over here, because these parts of the hair are gonna catch this kind of highlight. And notice how my highlight isn't like a thick paint, it's just a really thin down. I'm just again working on the overall and simmering it down. And there's also gonna be just a tiny dot of yellow over on this side, so we're just getting the part of the face in that light. We're also casting that chin, just her right side of her chin. I mean, it's her left, but it's our right, so we just kind of do that. And we also want to get it for the nose as well, so we just do that. Just notice how her nose immediately pops up a little bit more once we did that, which is great. Okay, so now we're also going to get on this finger and make sure that we get on the appropriate fingers. And now we are going to add more black in between these spots, so that the hand, just with really thin paint. I'm gonna continue a little bit more. Right. I'm gonna add a shadow, an imaginary shadow. Sorry, keep going off camera, just because I keep having the habit of looking off camera again, really looking through the camera every once in a while. Okay, so down here. And now let's go ahead and draw that sleeve in, because that sleeve is going to help us determine the darkness of our miniature. So we're going to grab our ink, the pilot ink here. I'm going to shake it like this, so it's just hitting the cap. Just going to leave this around there, and then I'm just going to draw it. Whoops, my fingers had ink. So this is writer's ink, but it's not discriminative to only writing. Pilot ink is actually what manga artists use to draw manga, and so they use it in both forms of brushes and with pens and quills. It's not discriminatory to anything. So notice how I'm over here, I'm just kind of filling in the darkest of the blacks onto the occlusion layers of this miniature. And because this part will definitely have it in very dark black, and this is how we're going to define the parts of our miniature which is the darkest, like here, because this part should definitely be black. We're just gonna go and work it down. I realized that recently when I was talking about miniature painting with other artists, because I'm just kind of used and exposed more to digital painting, manga drawing, illustrating using pens and inks, and of course painting in a Asian sense. Like, I mean, for the Chinese, we kind of focus on calligraphy style of writing. When we use painting, we focus on shapes. It's not really so much on techniques, but I've been having a lot of conversations with miniature painters, and I guess miniature painting is not exclusive to the West, but we have model kits and Gundams and Transformers here in Asia as well, like the West does. But it seems like there's a particular way that people perceive in order to do something. I'm not quite sure where that is from exactly. Underneath here, and we want to make sure we draw out these darkest points on the bottom of the miniature. So you guys can see I'm going to turn it this way, so it just makes it a little bit harder for me to hit around here. And again, I'm basically drawing out everything that kind of is away from the light, and allow the lighting to do the contrast for me. Okay, this such way. Okay, and now over here we are going to draw this occlusion, but only on one side. We are not going to douse the grays that we've kind of drawn, but we will do something later so that we can add more believability to it. But right now we just want to make sure we get in those darks. Kind of making sure we get that pitch black on the floor, looking upwards. Hey Pache. Over here as well, just gonna want to draw it a tad bit, really softly, nothing too hard. Over here as well, and here. Okay, well now, oh wait, I forgot the other side of the eagle. I almost forgot one part. Underneath the gout, I think that's what it's called. This way. In here. Underneath the texture here. Then we'll do it down like this. We'll just kind of draw that on for now. No big deal. Okay, there we go. Hey Pache, what's up? You jump on top? There you go, sayang. Okay, my cat's kind of on my lap right now, so she had to kind of just jump on there real quick. So we're gonna draw this occlusion layer in here like this, really softly. Careful, here, and of course underneath that arm over here. We need to make sure we get whatever was lost from before. We will check underneath her chin just to make sure that we get a annotation of her neck. We want to make sure to get underneath the belt as well. Okay, so again, occlusion is the parts that's underneath that happens when you pinch any two surfaces together. And that's what we're trying to make sure we get well and done here. Okay. All right, so now let's just kind of take a good look at it before we move on. Okay, so you can see now that there is, let's see how the lighting is. Oops. Okay, we've kind of gotten our darkest darks black back now, and where we need to in the miniature, especially this shade that I did earlier, is all coming together, which is great. Definitely need to work on the hair later on. Not to rush in that for now. Okay, so let's call it. Be sure to remember learning from others, guys, and to discover more of yourself, right? So take care. Toodaloo.